Welcome back to Make It to Midnight, hosted by yours truly, JP Hovey, coming to you live from Nashville, Tennessee. We have had some snow on the ground the last few days. There's one thing you need to know about me, and it's that I'm a summer guy, 1,000%, but I love a snow day, and there are some non-negotiables on snow days, and I hope everybody else has these non-negotiables. Number one, you must go sledding at least once. I don't care if it's a baby hill. I don't care if it's the best hill in your city. You got to get out there at least one time. There's no better free fun than sledding. And that free fun, we know this is Make It to Midnight. That wholesome, innocent fun is something that helps me make it to midnight, so I try to take advantage of it whenever I can. That is the first non-negotiable. Number two, you must build a snowman. Again, it can be small, it can be big, it can be medium, it can be fat, it can be skinny, it can be handsome, it could be ugly, but it needs to be there. You have to build the snowman. Number three, and there's either 4 or 5, I can't really decide, but number 3, you have to make a snowball and throw it at a friend. Snowball fights are some of the best types of fun. Here in Nashville, there was one bar restaurant having a snowball fight across the street with another bar/restaurant. There's also nothing funnier than getting a nice little snowball, catching somebody off guard to the back of the head, to the face, as long as it's not a hard snowball. But number 3, you got to build the snowballs. Number 4, you got to have at least some sort of soup, right? The soup I go for is udon noodle soup. Shout out to the Japanese culture because they have the best soups out there. So you got to have some soup. And number 5, I actually just came up with this one, but you got to at least watch one movie during a snow day, preferably at night. If you're watching the movie during the day, I have a little bit of judgment for you, but I won't hold it fully against you. But enough of all that. Welcome to Make It to Midnight. I'm JP, and now let's get into the show. All right, y'all know that we're going to start out these shows with the quote of the day. This is the reason I want to start it out this way is because I want these to be quick hitters. I want it to be, you always learned at least one thing when you come and listen or watch Make It to Midnight. And usually how I consume my content, I'll see a Chris Williamson video, and it's just a 30-second thing, and I see the quote, and I'm like, this is perfect. This gave me the added energy, the added oomph that I needed to go into my day. So our quote of the day comes from Alan Watts. If you're not familiar with Alan Watts, I will tell you a little bit about him. He's an influential leader. He was an influential leader in the counterculture revolution in the 60s in the U.S. and Britain. He's from Great Britain, but he came over to the U.S. when he was young. So the counterculture revolution, we know what that is. That's when the hippies kind of started to take over, but more importantly, a lot of Eastern spiritual ideas started to move over into the Western society. And Alan Watts was super interesting because he originally moved over to the U.S. to enroll. He started to train in Zen Buddhism. He wanted to become a monk or Buddhist, but he ended up disagreeing with the teacher and how they were teaching the class. So then he got his master's in theology and became an ordained priest in the Episcopal Church. He was only there for 3 years because for the same reasons, he didn't agree with everything that was going on. And so he is one of these guys that was able to weave in Buddhism, Taoism, all these Eastern religions, but make it more applicable and more like inviting, exciting for you to hear about in the West, which I'm all about. I think there's great teachings from a lot of these from all over the world. Everybody has different experiences. Everybody has something valuable to share with everybody. And Alan Watts is an interesting human being. Not the guy that he's not my role model. He had a lot of wives, a lot of kids, but he considered himself a philosophical entertainer, which I guess that's kind of what I'm trying to be with this show. But anyways, the quote goes like this: a person who thinks all the time has nothing to think about except thoughts. So he loses touch with reality and lives in a world of illusions. I'll say it one more time. A person who thinks all the time has nothing to think about except thoughts. So he loses touch with reality and lives in a world of illusions. Alan Watts. Love that quote. Overthinking is the number one killer of productivity, and this explains it. And all the people, I feel like, especially in our social media era, we have a lot of thinkers out there. and everybody thinks they're right, and they're the loudest. The thinkers also seem to be the loudest in the social media world. Whenever there's anything going on out in the world, it seems like everybody has an opinion. And more times than not, it's these people that are thinking all day. They're thinking about all the stuff that's going on, but there's no action. They're not actually out there living the things that they're talking about. They can say things about people. They can say crazy things about people, but they have never even met that person, never talked to that person, never tried to understand them. They're thinkers. I'm sure we all have people that we know. We're all guilty of this at times too. I feel like a lot of our lowest moments are when we are thinking and not doing. And that's when it gets tricky, because if you get stuck in that kind of circle of thinking, then it, like the quote says, you live in a world of illusion. You live in it long enough, it becomes your reality. And that is a scary reality to live in, because you're the only one that's viewing all of these things that way. I was reading something. It was like, when you're a middle school kid and you're getting ready to go to school, and if it's a girl, they're super concerned about how they look because of what everybody is probably thinking about them. When in reality, every other middle school kid is having that same thought when they're coming to school, and nobody is as worried about you as you. And so the minute you could kind of hold on to that freedom that you can get in your mind of like, hey, people don't really care that much what I'm up to. I need to stop overthinking. I need to stop worrying about what everybody has to say about me. I need to worry about what I have to say about me. And the best way to learn about yourself is to go out and do the things that you're interested in, that you're curious about, that you think could help you grow. But yeah, amazing quote. A person who thinks all the time has nothing to think about except thoughts, so he loses touch with reality and lives in a world of illusions. Let's not be that person that thinks all the time. Let's be the person that's about that action, that's learning, that does take time to think deeply on things, but never get caught up in your thoughts, because it can be a scary place to live in. Now, our main topic of the day, I just recently watched. I'm 2 episodes into Aaron Rodgers documentary. If you don't know who Aaron Rodgers is, he is an NFL quarterback, Super Bowl champion, future Hall of Famer, all-pro, all the accolades you could ask for in football, he's got. He's also a little bit controversial off the field, because he had a famous thing when COVID was going on that they asked him, "Are you vaccinated?" He said, "I'm immunized." Then they come to find out he's not vaccinated. Everybody turns him into this polarizing figure. And then we start to learn more and more about Aaron Rodgers, because he starts to share more about his life. And something he is into is this ayahuasca medicine treatment, which I don't fully understand, but he's going down doing these trips to figure out who he is and deal with some of these traumas that he's had in his life. Overall, the documentary is awesome, but the number one thing that I've taken away from it, he always mentions this thing called an ego death. And ego death could kind of sound scary, but for him, this is a good example of the ego death. When he was coming out of high school, remember, he's a Super Bowl champion. When he was coming out of high school, 0 D1 offers. He thought he had great stats. He was doing well, but no offers. That hurt the ego. He signs with the JUCO. Now he goes through the JUCO year. Ego's building, feeling good. Signs to University of California. Not the starter. Ego death. Man, I was the best quarterback in JUCO. I came here. This coach wanted me. How am I not the starter? Becomes the starter. Has an awesome year. Getting ready for the NFL draft. He's one of the top 2 quarterbacks. It's him and Alex Smith. A lot of you guys probably know way more about Aaron Rodgers than you know about Alex Smith. But in that draft, Aaron Rodgers fell all the way back to pick number 22. Ego death. He thought he was the man. He thought he was going to be taken in the top 5. Didn't happen. Now he goes to Green Bay. Brett Favre is in Green Bay. Brett Favre is another probably future Hall of Fame quarterback if he's not in yet. Brett Favre in Green Bay, legend, had won a Super Bowl with them. Aaron Rodgers has to sit for 3 years. Ego death. Then Aaron Rodgers plays with the Packers, ultimately gets to his Super Bowl, wins the Super Bowl, wins Super Bowl MVP. His whole life is exploding in what we would look at to be the best way ever. But he's left kind of feeling empty. And so in this documentary, and this isn't a foreign idea for these types of guys to feel empty after the Super Bowl. When Tom Brady, he won 3 Super Bowls in his first very early on in his career. And after that third one, he has a famous interview where he says, okay, I won the 3. Now what? Like, this can't be it. Was this really what I put all of my time and effort into? And did I think that it would provide me way more happiness than the moment, than what it gave me from winning it and putting that Super Bowl ring on? A lot of these guys are kind of distraught once they get to that mountaintop because that was their whole identity to get there. And this is what's cool about Aaron Rodgers being able to talk back through it, because and he didn't realize this at the time, but the journey is not the Super Bowl, right? Like, that's not the story that you tell. You're a Super Bowl champion. You don't tell the story of the Super Bowl. You tell the story of what it was to get to the Super Bowl. And what are the highlights of that story? Every single highlight of that story is the ego death moments. Wasn't recruited out of high school. I went to the JUCO. Wasn't initially the starter at college. Slipped in the draft, sat on the bench for 3 years. That is the story. So I love what Aaron Rodgers has to say about it, and this is his direct quote about ego, because ego can also be a weapon, or ego is a weapon. We either use it or it uses us. And he says this: we all have it. It's a really important part of our sport. I need that ego. That's what I take on the field. I need the people that passed on me. I need the people that doubt me. I need all of that. I want that. But the other side of the ego is anger, frustration, misrepresentation, sensitivity, and that's something you really have to rectify. So every time I've had major growth in my life, it has been associated with an ego death, dropping in the draft, injuries, being a backup in college and the NFL, playoff losses, all of that. It's the only way to change. I could not agree with that anymore. Ego deaths are the only way to change because they are the most difficult thing to do. The hardest thing to do is look yourself in the mirror and look at the bad parts of yourself. Nobody wants to confront that. They don't want to confront the ego. But if you can confront the ego and if you can master your own ego, there's no telling what you can do. Even though he's Aaron Rodgers, he has all the money, he's got all the accolades, we all battle these same things, right? Anytime our ego takes over, or anytime our ego takes a hit, we get mad, we get frustrated, we get sensitive, but we've learned. In my life, I get like it was ego, but it's like a perfect example of ego death because I was crushed is when I was first trying to get into the tennis world. And I'm knocking on the doors of all these tennis academies, and I'm legitimately offering free work to these companies that I know that this will provide value to them. And I'm not exaggerating when I say probably 25 to 30 places all said no in the span of 2 days, 1 or 2 days in South Florida. And I was crushed at the end of it. I'm questioning, man, I really must suck. And then once you're done, though, like kind of beating yourself up, you realize, hey, wait a second, I'm still here. And I got a whole nother opportunity, and there's a whole bunch of other places out there that I need to keep pounding the pavement, keep doing my thing. And that ego death was basically just like the slingshot, right? Where it's like, okay, all these people are saying all these things. You know what? Part of what they're saying is probably true. Which parts are they saying is true? Which parts of the people in our lives that are kind of doubting us, saying bad things about us, which parts are true? Because there is some truth to it, and we can't think that we're all high and mighty, because there's actually a quote about that too from C.S. Lewis, and it's in that Ego is the Enemy book I'm reading. It says, a proud man is always looking down on things and people. And of course, as long as you are looking down, you cannot see something that is above you. So don't be the guy that looks down, right? Because you're missing out on all of the different things that you need to be learning from everything that's above you, the people that are above you, the people that are in the places of their life that they want to be. But the biggest message, kill the ego. The ego deaths are hard. You don't want to go through it, but it ends up being the story. And everybody wants to have a cool story, right? We all want to have our hero's journey. And the only way to have a hero's journey is through the highs and the lows. A story with all highs is whack. Story with the lows, with the ego deaths, you can never get to that part. You can never achieve the number one thing you want to achieve without going through the ego deaths. And that's kind of it. Like the ego death, as crazy as it sounds, is the reward, because it's the most important part of everyone's journey. including Aaron Rodgers, including me, including you listening. So let's keep making it to midnight. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Wherever you're consuming it, please, if you can, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Like it on Spotify or Apple. And the number one thing, if you could just share it with a friend. And, yeah, week 5 is in the books. Ego death. Alan Watts, Aaron Rodgers. Shout out to everybody for the inspiration. And, yeah, I'll see you guys next week.